Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking your time to join us. I want to ground us in why we're here today. Hydra Fund exists because we believe that abortion access should not depend on legal permission, proximity to clinics, or the ability to pay for services or care. And we're here to talk about what it means to organize mutual aid around abortion and how we can build the world that we need and want right now. We at Hydra Fund come to this work from the perspective of people who have had abortions in the States, and who support people seeking abortions every single day. Another big reason why we're here is because the more people who know about our work, the more people we can support, the more people that you can connect us to. And we want to really explain how mutual aid can expand abortion access and how our model has been built upon generations of other movements and is connected to larger liberation work. And we also want to show folks the ways that they can get involved if you're interested in that, in ways that are comfortable to you and that make sense to you. So just a little bit about the agenda quickly. We're getting through the overview right now. We're going to talk a little bit about what mutual aid is. That's a term that's been thrown around a lot lately, and I want to make sure that we are on the same page in understanding what we mean when we say mutual aid. And then we're going to go into Hydra Fund's work and kind of how we came to be, the impact of our work currently, and then how you can plug in. And then there'll be some times for Q&As. If questions do pop up throughout, I'll make sure we stop and have a chance to talk about them, or feel free to save them towards the end, whatever feels comfortable to you. Okay, what is mutual aid? Mutual aid is the voluntary and collective exchange of resources and care to meet shared needs without hierarchy, profit, or permission. So it's really about people coming together to solve problems through solidarity and not charity. So it's different than a lot of the charity models that you might see. And the model is really based on the idea that everybody contributes what they can. So that's time, resources, energy, creativity, and so on, so that everybody can get what they need. And we believe very much that we are operating from a space of abundance, and that we do have the tools and resources that we need to take care of folks. A little bit of history about mutual aid, but this is not new. Indigenous communities around the world have always practiced mutual care and collective survival through kinship systems, shared labor, and reciprocity. And these systems really predate the idea of ownership or markets. So it's something that human organizations, human groups of human beings have done for thousands of years. And I have a book here. I'm going to we're going to drop some resources in the chat throughout this. So if you want to learn more about it or really want to dig into one particular area, you can do so. And Frankie's going to be able to drop the link to this text here by Leanne Simpson. Another one of the people that really popularized and brought to light mutual aid is a Russian anarchist in the 1900s, Kropotkin, who challenged the dominant interpretation of Darwinism, which was very popular at the time, and emphasized ruthless competition and like this idea of survival of the fittest as natural law. You've probably heard a lot about this kind of thinking in current politics, because it's still really popular framework for a lot of our policymaking decisions. And the survival of the fittest concept was used to justify capitalism, colonialism, and eugenics, arguing that inequality and domination were just part of nature, something that can't be helped. But what Kropotkin pushed back on with his book, Mutual Aid, A Factor of Evolution, which admittedly, it reads a little bit outdated now since it's old, but the values and the messages are very clear. But the argument was that cooperation, not competition, is what actually allows people to survive and thrive. And this wasn't just this concept. He really drew from biology, anthropology, and observations of indigenous communities and poor folks, and was able to show that mutual aid was actually a force of evolution just as real as natural selection and far more ethical. So that is really where the idea started taking off. Oh, and here's a great quote from Peter Kropotkin: "Practicing mutual aid is the surest means for giving each other into all the greatest safety, the best guarantee of existence and progress, bodily, intellectual, and moral." And liberation movements globally have practiced mutual aid, and we have a strong history and examples of these things. And you start to see mutual aid really coming up when systems have failed people. For example, the Black Panther Party ran over 60 survival programs, including free breakfast for children, health clinics, clothing drives, and housing support. And you can see here on the left, there's a photo from 1969 where a member of the Black Panther Party chapter in Kansas City serves free breakfast for children before they went to school. And then you also see this People's Free Health Center, which were mobile or pop-up health centers the Black Panther Party ran to make sure that people got healthcare. And there's a really great book about that too that Frankie's going to drop called Body and Soul. A couple other groups, the Young Lords, which were a Puerto Rican revolutionary organization that combined direct action with mutual aid. They were running free breakfast programs, health clinics, garbage cleanups to fight systemic racism and uplift their communities. Here's a picture of them in front of a mobile X-ray unit. And then obviously, some folks may remember the American Indian movement, and they had very similar programs set up. Here's a picture of the IFH, a community center that was one of the oldest in the country, founded in 1955 in Oakland. They're still operating today, but they really wanted to create a resource and community organization for people who are relocated from reservations to the San Francisco Bay Area as part of federal policies. So you can start to see people who are, living amongst everyone else, but who are just saying our needs are not being met. We are disenfranchised, we are underserved. And instead of waiting for policy change, instead of waiting for funding to come through, they organize together to meet the needs of their communities immediately. Of course, there's the Jane Collective. People might be familiar with this group, especially if you do abortion work, but it was an underground collection or underground network of women in the 1960s and 70s of Chicago who provided safe, affordable abortions before Roe v. Wade. And they were practicing mutual aid through direct action, medical care, and establishing radical trusts. A fun fact is that a few of us at Hydra Fund got to learn how to perform abortions on papayas from a member of the Jane Collective last summer, so 2 summers ago, I think now. So there's a cool sharing of knowledge throughout generations that we are very much interested in cultivating and then sharing with others. And then in the modern context, in what way, what has inspired, I think, a more contemporary thinking around mutual aid is what happened after Hurricane Katrina. People were just left without resources and care, and people really stepped up to take care of things that we typically would think of as being state provided, like providing water, cleanup services, healthcare, when the government abandoned them. So again, mutual aid is not charity. So charity is often seen as a top-down, conditional, and rooted in control. And charity also often reinforces power dynamics and gatekeeping. This might be something like we answer instead to our funders rather than to the people we serve. You have to balance those kinds of challenges. Instead, mutual aid really builds a horizontal relationship and redistributes power from the ground up. And it's really not about helping the less fortunate or forcing people to prove that they need help or that they have been underserved in a significant way to make some type of metric. It's just about recognizing the fact that we all have needs and we also all have something to offer. In contrast, to a lot of these charity models, we want to build a model that is participatory and collective. And mutual aid here, it says, ask, what do you need? What can I share, and how do we survive together? And it's really about building a relationship. So, there are some movements and some other organizations within the abortion access movement, that are there really meeting needs specifically. And then that's the last interaction they may have with folks, or that's the last kind of, they're really they're putting a Band-Aid on an issue, which is like, let me just get you funding so you can get the care that you need, and that's it. And what we're trying to do is go beyond that and really create a stronger and more informed system of care so that we can have more capacity to take care of one another as time goes by. Oh, and then I don't know if Frankie, I can't see the chat, but there's a couple more links in here I wanted to share. So one is a link from Dean Spade, who wrote a book called Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next. It was a great book. Dean Spade also has an organization called Big Door Brigade, or it was a project of Dean Spade's, that has tons of mutual aid resources, workbooks, links to videos. It's a super fantastic resource, and that's going to be dropped in the chat as well. I want to note too that, mutual aid is not just about dropping a Cash App or Signal thread request to add some, to pay someone's Venmo because there's somebody who's feeling like disenfranchised or put out. And I think that I'm saying that because that's the way that we often, a lot of activists are encountering the term mutual aid. A mutual aid request is usually like a funding request, but I understand that those can be valid and necessary, but real mutual aid is about building ongoing organized relationships of care and support, not just one-time transactions. It's really about expanding agency and solidarity. And it's rooted in trust and a shared struggle and collective responsibility, not just emergency requests. So it really treats those with the problems as the ones best equipped to solve it with each other's help. So we're not coming at this from a perspective of people who don't know what it's like to have very little money, don't know what it's like to need to get an abortion in challenging circumstances. We understand what that's like, and we want to invite other people in to organize with us who also have that understanding. Okay, so now we're moving on to who Hydra Fund is. Here's a funny, cute old picture of us when we first started a few years ago, one of our first tabling events. So Hydra Fund was founded by a group of activists in 2022. So we had already been organizing around reproductive access and sexual rights and education for some of us for a decade or more before founding Hydra Fund, but it was in the wake of Roe v. Wade's collapse that we got together. And we came together with a shared commitment that we weren't going to wait for political or social permission to care for our communities, that we wanted to provide support right here and right now in the place where we're from, because we understand what the region is like and the needs are like in this area. And we also recognize that traditional systems and large organizations like Planned Parenthood and the Democratic Party, for example, often leave people behind, especially those facing the greatest barriers. And we really noted that we needed a community-driven solution. So before launching the organization, what we did was conduct a landscape analysis. So that's a process of identifying existing resources, gaps in care, and the most urgent needs in our region. And through that analysis, we determined the following: that our state was only had one state-based fund covering all of Michigan. So most of the funds in Michigan are regional based. So they will only cover a particular series of clinics or in a certain county. And we couldn't find one that was specifically focused on teaching and telling people about telehealth and funding telehealth in particular. We also weren't able to find local resources that were willing to talk to people about accessing telehealth in particular. And there were no local support resources for people who want to have self-managed abortions or what we call accompaniment doulas. So people who are there to be on call at all times when people are self-managing their abortions at home through medication, whether they get the medication from a clinic or through the mail. We knew that there were some national organizations, but nothing that was local. So we identified those issues and came up with some questions, which is, how can we address systemic barriers to access given that our current resources? So we don't have very much money. At the time, we had no money. We had some training, we had some background, We knew some people, but we just said, okay, what's the wealth that we do have? And what resources can we provide to people with the least barriers and with the broadest reach? So knowing that we don't have very much in terms of resources ourselves, but what we do have, what will help people the most? How can we remain flexible and adaptable as the conditions change in our country, as the conditions change within the group? And how can we fill in gaps rather than duplicate current efforts? So we didn't want to have to be kind of either competing for resources or trying to recreate a new system or a system that had already existed by people who know what they're doing and have been doing it for much longer than us. And here's the answers that we came up. The systemic barriers of access given our current resources, we realized that we could educate people, that information is extremely liberating in this movement, that information literally equals access, and that people weren't really out there talking too much about abortion care in community settings with people on the ground. So we knew that we could go out and start talking to people, educating people, giving people setting up workshops, and then also training other people to do that same kind of work. We also knew that we would be able to provide, or we wanted to provide additional resources for people experiencing intersectional challenges. So one of the things that and we'll go into a little bit more detail in this in a minute, but we wanted to make sure that if someone says, I'm experiencing housing insecurity, job insecurity, I'm seeking childcare, that we weren't just going to help them get an abortion and say good luck, that we were going to connect them with resources and tools and other organizations that are doing good work so that they have those kinds of connections. And we were going to follow up with people as requested to make sure that they were able to kind of meet those needs in between. In terms of what resources we can provide, we knew that we could provide a medication abortion sent to the home. So when we first started, we were providing up to $300 of care for people's clinical abortions, but we just realized that wasn't sustainable given the amount of funding that we had. We would need something close to almost $500,000 a year to meet the needs of people who wanted to do clinical care reaching out to us. So we decided that in order to meet the broadest amount of needs, that we would be able to get people abortion medication to their home for free and walk them through the process of ordering that medication, making sure they got shipping and tracking, they got the protocol, they understood exactly what to expect. They knew the supplies to pick up on their way to self-manage, or we would mail them supplies like pads and heating pads and things for comfort. We would be able to support them through that and then be available throughout the experience through accompaniment support and a training. And then we've developed like a training program to train people to be able to support people through those abortions. And then how we can remain flexible and adaptable. We really wanted to make sure that we are in direct communications with people to allow us to cater services to them. So to really be able to provide opportunities for our clients or people who come to ask for help to tell us what they need. And then follow up later and figure out how we can improve. And then in terms of, again, filling in gaps rather than duplicating efforts, that comes back to this accompaniment support, this kind of hands-on from start to finish care, and then making sure that we are funding people's medication. And that includes making sure people know all of their options. So when people do come to us, we make sure that they know you have options to get clinical care, to travel, if that's something they have to do depending on their gestational age, that they can get abortion sent to their abortion medication sent to their home. So we just make sure, we just trust that people have the agency and value them to know what's best for them if they're given the best information or given all information. I wanted to make sure I underscore our values here because this really informs our work and the way that we approach our work. But we believe that everybody deserves equal access to reproductive health care, regardless of their economic and geographic barriers. So that means if somebody lives in the UP, for example, where there is no longer a clinic, or maybe there will be a clinic sometime soon, but that they deserve to have access to just as much as anybody who lives in the Metro Detroit region. And beyond that, they deserve to have abortion care that is affordable, that is easy to access, and without stigma and shame. And we also believe that solutions are most effective when they come from the communities they serve. So again, that comes back to us wanting to build the solution and network within the state where we live, where we've grown up, and then involve and engage people who also are from this area to take care of our neighbors and take care of our family members. We also will always honor the dignity and decision-making of every individual and trust the lived experience of those we support. So that means if we talk to somebody and they don't know if they're ready for abortion, we will give them resources, or we will talk it through with them to make sure that they have the options that they want, or if they have the time that they may want to take. That ultimately this is up to them, and that we are not here to influence their decision-making or thought process whatsoever, but we are here to simply trust and give them all information so that they can make informed decisions about what's best for them. As I mentioned earlier in the first section, we approach our work as a collective effort, so we support one another. We each, members who want to just take a lead on a project are encouraged to do that. And we really believe that this will build stronger, more informed communities. And then we really want our resources to be available to all. And we believe that everybody has the right to that information to navigate their reproductive futures with confidence. So if somebody comes to us and they're curious about abortion with medication past first trimester, we are going to share what that experience is like and trust that they can make the decision that's best for them. We are not interested in gatekeeping. We really believe that people know what's best for them if given the right information. A little bit, I just wanted to note the name because it comes up sometimes in questions. Why are we called Hydra Fund? And it's because it reflects the unstoppable nature of this movement. In mythology, Hydra was this many-headed creature, and once one head was cut off, more grew back in its place. And that's how we see abortion access, that you can try, the government or politicians may try to ban it and restrict it or silence it, but we will always, always find another way to care for each other no matter what, and that there is no ending abortion. There will always be more of us, and there will always be more people stepping up. There will always be more networks forming and more community-led solutions. And you cannot kill a movement that's built on solidarity. And that's where the name Hydra comes from. So here's how all of those kind of solutions that we came up work in action. We provide all options counseling, so non-judgmental, comprehensive information about reproductive health care choices, including abortion, parenting, and adoption, as well as all procedural and abortions with medication. We let the clients ask us what they'd like to know. We offer them information if that's of interest to them, but our counseling ensures that clients are supported with information that they can trust to make informed decisions with confidence and clarity. We also provide full financial coverage for telehealth abortion services. So we are eliminating cost barriers for medication abortion. And for procedural care, we will try to offer partial financial supporting when funding allows. And we have prioritized people that are in the second trimester or people with complications in order to make sure that we have enough funding to care for folks. But we really want to bridge the gap for those who cannot afford clinic-based care. Our abortion accompaniment program, it's a model that we found and learned in Mexico, actually, with accompaniment networks that have been there for close to a decade. And through that model, we provide compassionate on-call support throughout their process, whether it's through email, phone, text, or in some cases, in-person care. We guide clients every step of the way. And we ensure that they have access to their resources and tools, like I said, for pain relief and anti-nausea, and remain available for any follow-up support. And then we have our community education program, which is through workshops and trainings and resource distribution. We foster advocacy and create local information hubs. And that's what we are hoping to do, that throughout the state, that people aren't necessarily having to come to the Hydra Fund that started in Metro Detroit, that they have a community member or a location where they can go for information that's close to them through people that they know. so that we can drive cultural change that's really rooted in communities and strengthen access across the state. And then here you see in this picture, there's like photos of these battle rations at the bottom. These are Sexual Healthcare Resource Initiative. So these are kits that involve things like Plan B, information about abortion, access and resources, obviously, and funding, condoms, lube, free pregnancy tests. And we want to make sure that these are distributed throughout the states, through partnerships with local organizations and community hubs. And we want to make sure that the resources are really reaching underserved populations so that people can make proactive, informed decisions about their healthcare. We've distributed over 2,000 of them since we've gotten started, and we have like bolstered our program this year so that we have I think like close to 15 locations now and growing, so that we are getting this information out to people who don't even know that it exists. And hopefully they'll see this cute little kit and they'll want to take it, and then they have some tools. And then finally, practical support connections. So we have relationships with regional practical support organizations, like they're called Repro TLC, but formerly they were called Midwest Access Coalition. We also are connected with organizations across the country who provide things like transportation care, hotel care, even flights for people who may need to travel from out of state. So the first step is that we've understood the logical and systemic barriers that prevent access to care, and then are able to connect clients to organizations that provide these critical services like childcare, housing, and transportation. As I said before, we also will link people to other resources that they may need, like job placement, domestic violence support, federal aid navigations, knowing that there's overlapping needs. And then on occasion, when we can't get the resources from the larger organizations for things like hotel care, we will just step up and pay for that care on an as-needed basis. So just a little about how we're organized, but we are an all-volunteer organization and collective. Our decision-making process is also collective, with volunteers and collaborating to set priorities for the year and manage operations, and to ensure that our mission aligns with the needs of the people we're serving. And it also reflects our values. So our decisions, again, are made collectively. Our financial transparency is prioritized. And we really depend, like our capacity for helping people and expanding our program is dependent on the people who are participating. So we have lots of big dreams and goals, and we are keeping them on on our like annual plan and dream list. And really, we just have to meet people that are willing to kind of step up and take part. We are a fiscally sponsored project, so we have a 501c3 nonprofit advantages. And we are managed to a large national nonprofit organization. Okay, so I want to just briefly talk about our impacts and why this work is needed. So as most of you may know, that abortion is technically legal across the state of Michigan, but legal does not mean accessible. In Michigan, there are still significant barriers that make access far from accessible. There are geographic barriers. So most Michigan residents live more than an hour away from the nearest clinic. And again, as I mentioned earlier, in the UP, as the last clinic recently closed down, although I hear that they're getting another one soon, hopefully. But currently there's no clinical access. And even if there's only one, that still creates a massive burden for people who may have to travel many hours for care. People who would want to travel for a brick and mortar clinic right now in a place like Marquette would have to drive somewhere between 4 and 6 hours away to their nearest clinic. And that's just one way. So geographic barriers, needing to have access to a car and time off, and all of the things that people need to do to take time off to go get medical care is a huge barrier. Also, figuring out just like how to find abortion care can be extremely daunting and difficult. It's confusing. There's things called crisis pregnancy centers throughout the state that far outnumber the clinics, which are intended to mislead people seeking for abortion care. They're easily mistaken for abortion clinics. So it can be stressful and hard. So that's another huge barrier. And then, of course, cost barriers. So many people, most people that we talk to cannot afford the high cost of clinical abortions. And Hydra Fund really wants to bridge this by providing telehealth support and funding, but abortions in clinic can cost somewhere usually between $600 would be the average price to over $1,200. And again, that doesn't include things like gas if people do want to travel, childcare, a hotel if they have to travel far enough where they need 2 days to get there and back. So this is a massive burden. And then again, there's also a lack of comprehensive healthcare education. So we really want to make sure that there is access to information about what people's options are. And because there's this lack of information, we often meet people who, when we're tabling, that say like, I didn't even know abortion pills were a real thing, or what's the difference between abortion pill and Plan B, or people who are unsure quite literally if they're pregnant or not, because they're just not sure how to ask and what the signs are and how the whole system works. So that is a huge barrier. Another thing we wanted to mention is that the kind of healthcare provisions that we support and fund the telehealth is offering safe and inclusive care for LGBTQ plus folks. So it can be really hard to try to drive or walk into a place that's called something like a women's center, or that is framed exclusively as a women's issue. And that can be really traumatizing, stigmatizing, and challenging experience. So the telehealth focused model that we fund offers a stigma-free alternative, providing dignified and compassionate support that affirms all gender identities and ensures access to care without fear of misgendering or discrimination. And here's just a few quotes from clients here that we pulled from our last report, for annual report. So far, since we started in 2022, we've served 953 clients, meaning that we've counseled them, we've provided them with access to resources and tools. We've fully covered the cost of just over 300 abortions, and that we're exponentially growing every year. We've so far hosted 14 abortion workshops and distributed over 2,000 of those sexual health care kits I mentioned. Oh, here's a picture of some of our members at the Democratic National Convention, which happened this past summer, making sure that our information about how people can get abortion pills was hopefully taken pictures of by the national media, which did happen, which is great. Oh, here's some cute pictures that I wanted to put up from just this year of tabling at prides and community festivals. And just like the last few months, we used to only do one pride table, and it was our biggest event of the year in terms of recruiting volunteers and letting people know that we exist. But then this year, we've done something like, I don't even know how many, at least 6 or something, but it's been a really amazing experience. So I want to just mention a few things about how you could plug in, or what kind of support is needed in Michigan still, from our perspective at least. Access is really not just about clinics or pills. It's also so much about knowing what's possible. When people have accurate, up-to-date information about their options, they can make empowered decisions and access care safely, even in hostile or confusing environments. Misinformation and fear keep people from getting the care that they need, but sharing fact-based information is one of the most powerful tools that we have, and it costs nothing, which is great, and it can literally save lives. So one thing that we encourage you to do is just get up to date on the state of abortion access in Michigan. We didn't go into that very much at all here, but there was a webinar we did 2 weeks ago, which is now up online on YouTube. Frankie's going to drop it in the chat. But it goes over kind of the legal conditions, the legal barriers also for things like minors, and the kinds of conditions and experiences that people are having in the state. So we also want you to know what resources exist in your region. So do you know what your nearest clinic is? And do you know what services they provide? There are a lot of clinics that only provide medication and don't provide surgical or clinical care at all. Or they may provide that kind of service, but they only provide up to 12 weeks or 10 weeks or 8 weeks. It depends. So knowing what resources exist in your area will help you tell somebody else if there's a question and it comes up. So we recommend that you could visit ineedanA.com, which is an up-to-date community or movement-led website that lets folks know what their nearest clinic is and all of those little details, the costs, the limits of the clinic, and so on. And organize a group of friends and invite us to teach you about self-managed abortion. We can give you a full rundown on how to find abortion pills, where they come from, how you can take them, how you can support somebody who's taking them, and all of the good stuff. We also have taught a lot about the history of reproductive justice and how this movement has come to be based on systemic injustices to our bodies. And so there's a broader connection there. We can also teach you how to teach this information, which we would love to do so that you can start to lead these kinds of workshops. You can distribute postcards about our funds and our services. So again, if people don't know about us, they can't access our services. So share our posts online. You can send us an email. The email will be coming up in the next slide or two. If you want, we'll send you a stack of postcards about our services that you can put about town, in community centers, in restaurants, in bars, wherever you think people will grab it, because you never know, if one person takes it, it might make a huge difference in their life. Oh, I've done a second. Okay. We also ask you to stay in touch. So if you haven't already joined our newsletter, and our mailing list, newsletter and mailing list are the same thing, but we encourage you to do so. Frankie's going to drop a link to join our mailing list, but we only email people once a month, and it really just encapsulates all of our actions, all of our upcoming activities, recommended readings, and things from the movement and folks that we collaborate with. And if you would like to start organizing for using the same kind of model that we're following, if you want to kind of expand Hydra Fund's reach in your region outside of Metro Detroit, we really want to support you. And we encourage you to send us an email at support@hydra-fund.org. And I want to set up, we've been doing these one-on-one calls with folks just to say, like, what are your resources? And that comes from everybody who's like, I want to get a group together and I want to do a book club. I want to get a group together and we want to distribute the battle rations, the sexual health care kits. I want to get posters, and we will make sure you have all of those tools and resources and training so that you can kind of become that hub wherever you're located. One of the biggest things that we want to tell people is that you can get abortion pills in advance, and I encourage you to share this with people who might be people who might need an abortion, but you can get them before you need them just to have on hand. They last for about 2 years before they start kind of losing efficacy, so they should be stored in a cool and dry place, so not a fridge or freezer. But we encourage you this because there's been ongoing legal threats to mifepristone, which is one of the main medications for abortion care here in the States. So instead of, we're trying to get ahead of kind of the fear around losing mifepristone or potential delays in shipping. If you can just, and we also want to understand, or we also want to note that $150, which is the average cost to get advanced provision medication, can sometimes be a lot for one person just to have something on hand, but we want to encourage people to get together with a few friends and just go in together on one set of pills. Then if you and 4 or 5 of your friends have a set of pills between you, it's more likely that one of you is going to maybe potentially need it, and then you guys have each other's back and can have it right there when you need it, no matter what. And I want to just note that although the courts and politicians and anti-abortion groups are working hard to restrict or ban abortion pills, even in states where abortion is legal, and there's been talks about this on the federal level, these attacks do not reflect the safety or science behind the medication, but they are reflective of the political agendas. And advanced access really does equal autonomy. And it is a form of harm reduction and resistance in a moment where things are very uncertain across the state or across the country. Just a small plug to just say that we always need money. We rely on donations and grant funding to survive. Our budget this year was up to 50K, but to increase support, we would need like I said earlier, closer to $500,000 if we were going to pay for like up to $300 of each person who wanted that kind of care, or even the full care. But we are hoping at least to make to $150,000 annually is the next step. So if you're good at organizing events or fundraisers, consider hosting one for Hydra Fund. If you're good at writing grants, email us and we need your help, either finding grants or writing them or just staying on top of that kind of thing. That would be so helpful. Or if you have a really rich friend, tell them to support us. We're getting close to the end, so hold on to your hats. We're getting to Q&A, but a final resource that I really wanted to plug here is this website called You Always Have Options. It was created by movement folks, and it is a one-stop shop so that if you want to tell people where they can get pills in advance, they can go to this very easy website. You Always Have Options. The website intentionally doesn't use the word abortion in the title so that teachers or other folks can share information about it with people while kind of flying under the radar. But this is a super easy website because it's organized in this very simple way, but it kind of gets you the core resources, which is like how to get pills in advance, where to find a clinic, how to get a hold of doctors or people offering free medical hotline support, free legal support, free funding, and then just kind of talking through options. So, and then the final is digital security. So if folks are concerned, especially in places where it's restricted, about their chat history, their search history potentially being used against them, there's a great resources there, the Digital Defense Fund, that can help you remain safe when you're searching for information about abortion. I really appreciate you spending your time with us tonight and learning and all the work that you all are doing as well.